rebuild of the favorites. We here for the latest. South side or the north side, not tuned to the greatest. Home team for the home teams. Both sides got our own rings. On the mound or the long ball, but we don't pull the wrong strings. Yeah. It's that time of the year now. Wrigley or Ganty, so the whole league that we hear now. New show with a new mood. Discussions and interviews. Trade rumors that might be. This is Pinwheels and Ivy.
Hello and welcome to the Pinwheels and Ivy podcast. I'm Mitch Kaminski, bringing you White Sox talk every Wednesday in the 12 o'clock hour. Apologies for the late start today. We're supposed to start around 12:15. Bit of technical difficulties getting into StreamYard. We got that figured out though. So happy to be joining you on this Wednesday. Let's start with the bullpen here today. White Sox coming off a really exciting, it was a good team victory last night against the Cincinnati Reds. It's a bit of a rain delay to start the game. They end up going with the opener and Brandon Iser. He pitches a scoreless inning, does his job. Jonathan Cannon comes in. We talked a little bit about Cannon last week, how it looks like he looks more like a pitcher all of a sudden. He's been working through some jams. He's making big pitches when he needs to. He had a great outing last night, made it through 6, kept the Reds off the scoreboard, really turned it over to the bullpen with a shot to win that game. White Sox were up 1-0 thanks to Edgar Caro. We're going to get to that in a second. And so coming to the bottom of the 9th inning, that score still holds. Will Venable's got some decisions to make. This bullpen's been filled with question marks. There's only a couple guys that really you can say you trust in this bullpen, in these high leverage situations. They've used a rotation of guys, but like the mix of guys right now to this point have been Jordan Leisure, Cam Boozer, Mike Bassel, and now all of a sudden Steven Wilson. And Leisure, honestly, I think Leisure has the stuff to be a closer, but he makes you very uncertain when he comes into a game. Like there's always like he's very inconsistent. Like sometimes he comes out there, like there's a couple outings against Boston this year. He shoved. He looked really good. They couldn't touch that slider. And then there's other ones. It's like, man, like when he gets hit hard. So Leisure, not totally. He's got the stuff to be a closer, but like the consistency's got to follow. So like that's one where he goes into a game, you're kind of holding your breath. Boozer, I think, has been solid. He's been a pretty good option throughout the year. You look at his numbers this season. So last year he was a little bit better. Right now he's got a 4.50 ERA, which isn't great, obviously. The expected ERA though is much lower at 3.84. The expected batting average is really good. Expected batting average was only 199 against him, and so that's good to see. Now his strikeout rate is down a bit from this year. Well, it's around the same actually as it was this year, but it's still, just over the top half of the league. He's in the 63rd percentile on that. He's striking out 24% of the batters he faces. So left-hander with some pretty good stuff. He's having a pretty good year. Not quite as great or as good as last year's numbers right now, but some of that has been due to some bad luck. We saw Chase Mydroff. He dropped the ball off his head in that one outing, so that wasn't really his fault. So he's been better than his numbers show. The other guy that's been really good this year has been Steven Wilson. I said this a few weeks ago when he was pitching at Fenway Park. Like, this guy looks like a guy that could be a late inning guy. It appears that he found something in AAA when he got DFA'd. So you look at his numbers this year, he's having a very solid season. He's had 11 appearances, 2.25 ERA, 12 strikeouts. His whip at 0.83, which is really good to see. High whiff rate right now at nearly 30%. Strikeout rates around 26%. So expected batting average against him still 224. So opponents also not hitting the ball very hard off of him either. So both of these guys, pretty good options. Boozer, we've seen a couple times in the 9th inning. So the big discrepancy last night was the guy leading off the game, or the 9th inning for him, was Elly De La Cruz for the Reds. And one of the reasons they went to the opener there, I think, was so Jonathan Cannon didn't have to face Elly De La Cruz the first time. Because Elly De La Cruz is a switch hitter, but like his splits from the left-hand side, significantly better from the right-hand side. I think on the right-hand side, he's only hitting like 211. He does the bulk of his damage from the left-hand side. So a lot of people are arguing like, hey, they have Boozer up in the bullpen ready to go. He's a lefty. Why don't we mitigate that and let Elly hit from the right-hand side? And I get that argument. I think that makes the most sense baseball-wise. I think from where Will Venable was coming from, though, he's like, we got to figure out who we can trust in these late-inning situations. This was a chance. Hey, we're going to give Wilson the ball here and put up or shut up. Let's see what you can do. This game, the inning's yours. And he he's been pretty good most of the year. And honestly, the game plan, I didn't even have the problem with them facing him. Would it have probably made more sense to have Boozer facing him strategically? Yes. But I get where Venable would want to say, hey, let's see what Wilson can do here in a safe situation. He's been improved. Honestly, he's pitched well enough to deserve this shot. Let's see if he can lock it down. And I think the game plan that him and Edgar Carroll had was solid. It just wasn't well executed. Now, you look at his splits here. So he starts them off with a changeup for a ball. Then there was a sweeper for a ball. So they're down 0-2, so then he's a big pitch. He makes a big pitch on the sweeper. You get the strike, evens the count with a 4-seam fastball. So now we got 2-2 count, big pitch coming up. He throws another sweeper. Now the count's full. So at this point, he has not thrown his changeup in 4 pitches. And you look at Elly De La Cruz's splits this season. Versus fastballs, he's hitting 274 with an average exit velocity 94 miles an hour. So you really don't want to throw get me over fastball to hit. Versus breaking stuff, he's hitting 286. He hits breaking stuff pretty good, which is very surprising. He hits it well. But just typical off speed, he's only hitting 143. Exit velocity goes down to 79 miles an hour compared to the 90 miles an hour against breaking balls, 94 mile an hour average exit velocity against fastballs. So this is a prime time for a changeup. Changeup would have been the right pitch here. He throws a sweeper, hangs it over the middle of the plate. It was right over the heart of the plate. And De La Cruz crushed it, like tattooed that thing. Tie ball game. It would have been very frustrating, but luckily the offense helped pick them up. I'm really liking the way this offense, they with Chase Mydrop and Edgar Carroll, this is another thing we're talking about. The dynamic of that whole offense changes when those two are in the lineup. It really helps having Carroll near the middle of the order because the guy, he comes up big. When there's guys on base, he has a knack for driving and runs. He gets big hits. And we've seen that a couple different times this year. We saw it in that Houston series twice. The Houston series and against Miami. Came up with a big hit against Miami in that rain-shortened game. He also had a big hit that Friday night game against Houston. So last night, he had the 1 RBI that early in that game with 2 outs, I believe it was at the time too. So he's been a revelation. So luckily they picked up Steven Wilson there. So that was good to see that, kind of no harm, no foul. But, to everyone that was upset, I still got I think Steven Wilson's one of the few guys that you can trust in these leverage spots. Like, look, it's not a lot of great options. Admittedly, I think that's one of the reasons why they're talking about having Grant Taylor come up to the majors. Now, Grant Taylor, he's been crushing it down in the minor leagues this year. Really, really good stuff. Now, I think he's a starter long-term, but it sounds like the White Sox, based off of, I believe, what Scott Merkin had the report, it sounds like they're kind of going to take the Chris Sale, the Garrett Crochet approach where, hey, you know what? This guy's stuff can play in the big leagues. Let's get him his first taste of big league action. In the bullpen, we can also manage his workload a little bit. You can kind of max out, build some confidence there. And also it'll kind of help us because we don't have a whole lot of these guys that we can trust. Got Southside Deech in the chat. Thanks for joining us, Deech. He goes, Vassell, Boozer, and Wilson need to take all the leverage spots away from Leisure. Those seems like they are stretching Vassell out, though. Yeah, every time they use Vassell, because they almost don't use him the high leverage spot. I see him throwing a lot of midway through games. He'll be in those 6th, 7th inning type rules where he's throwing a couple innings. So it's kind of interesting to see how they deploy him. Especially when they do these openers, it makes, I think that also kind of takes some stress off the bullpen too, by doing the opener thing. If you can get that starter to eat up the traditional starter to come in and eat up more innings than they usually would. Cannon's been throwing the ball really, really well as late. I may owe him an apology because I don't think he was a major league starter long-term, and he's starting to prove me wrong, which is really good to see. He's been throwing the ball very, very well. The point being, I don't have an issue with Will Venable using Wilson there tonight. Especially with a team like this, when they're not expected to win many games. Now, when you have a chance to win, obviously you want to capitalize it. But hey, this is a chance to experiment. They've given Boozer some shots in the 9th inning. Let's give Wilson a shot here. Didn't work out. Offense picked him back up. They got the win anyway. No harm, no foul. Another thing I want to talk about. So one of the things on offense, one of the interesting things, because the White Sox have about the same record they had this year as they did last year when they set that record in futility, winning just 41 games. This year does feel a little bit different, and we've said it before. A lot of these games are a lot closer. The White Sox feel like they're more competitive in these games, but the numbers don't necessarily reflect that. But one of the reasons is this team's getting on base, specifically in the walk variety, which is something this team has never done well. The last time this White Sox team was good was 2021. Now, they were 4th in the MLB in walks that year, which almost never happens. Now, a lot of that was because Yasmani and Grandal had a really good, an insane season that year. Moncada was also getting on base a lot. But when this offense is doing well, they're drawing walks. But historically, White Sox don't draw walks well. So that's really impressive to see. Most encouragingly, though, and this is something with Luis Robert, who hasn't been hitting the ball all that well, is, he's hitting well. So, like, if you watch the White Sox offense, right now, they are 28th in runs scored in the MLB. So that's not great. Home runs, they're dead last. Slugging percentage, dead last. But where the improvements coming is walks right now, they're 16th in the MLB. So that's an encouraging sign. I believe it was Beef Loaf on the 108. He had a really good blog about that. Go check that out. He gets some more in depth with me. But this is something I was kind of talking about in an article as well earlier. I wrote last week with Luis Robert Jr. While his numbers on paper don't look all that good, he's finding ways to be productive because he's able to get on base right now. He has a career high 12% walk rate. And that's a big reason why he's been able to lead the league in stolen bases. This is a 5-tool player. Everyone always talks Luis Robert, 5-tool player. But if he's not getting on base, he can't use a lot of those tools, especially if he's not slugging well. So now that he's able to start drawing some walks, he gets on first base and, he's able to get in scoring position more often than not. I think he stole his 16th base last night, which for an offense that's struggling to hit home runs, that's kind of what you need to do. Manufacture these runs. They're also because they don't hit for a whole lot of average on this team either right now. They're getting on base, but they don't hit for a whole lot of average. So that's encouraging to see with Robert. I think it's also very good for his trade value because once this weather starts heating up, I think there are signs that Robert is going to start breaking out. He's seeing pitches very well. It's been pretty cold early in these months. I don't want to use that excuse forever. The weather is starting to heat up, but I do suspect we're going to see Robert start to break out soon. But that's why it's important for these guys. And it's nice to see the Ryan Fuller effect, who they brought him to Baltimore to be like the hitting czar. I think you are starting to see some of that because Robert's not the only one. Matt Tice, they brought in too, has been excellent this year. He has a 21.6% walk rate at the moment, which is incredible. And I think that might solve because there's going to be a lot of questions when Corey Lee comes back. What do they do with the catcher situation? You can't send down Carroll. He's been one of the best people on offense. Tice, I've been really impressed with. Not only does he walk a lot, he works really good at bats. He doesn't chase stuff out of the zone. There isn't a whole lot of power, but he makes up where he gives this team a chance, keeps the line moving because he gets on base. And he handles the pitching staff really well. He's been playing some good defense, gunned a couple guys out the other night behind the plate. And he's the lone veteran catcher on that staff. So I think two things are going to happen once Corey Lee returns. I don't think they send Caro down. I think Lee's got one more option, so they can afford to send him to Charlotte. Let's just make sure you're fully healthy, type deal. Build a little confidence back up. And Tice, I think if he keeps playing the way he does, there could be a team at the deadline that you might be able to flip him for. Now, if you don't flip him and you want to keep him handling this young pitching staff the rest of the season, I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. But I do find it going to be hard to believe that they carry three catchers, especially with Tim Elko coming up and Andrew Vaughn. The DH thing gets a little bit murky. I feel like they kind of have that locked down right now. So I would suspect they would move Corey Lee to the minor leagues, could use that last option, and keep Tice as long as they can if he can keep playing the way he can until they can try and trade him. Would be my guess. Because Caro shouldn't go anywhere. Caro's been such a revelation for this offense. I've been so impressed with him since he's come up, but you really shouldn't be surprised. If you look at his minor league numbers, it's very comparable. I mean, he's always been able to hit, and he hits for a high average, which is rare for a catcher. So that's really, really encouraging to see. Also, shout out Miguel Vargas, man. They came into the season, and Fuller was saying, Fuller and Brian Bannister were both saying heading into this season, it was more so Fuller, I believe. They were asking him who's going to carry the offense. And they said, hey, we think Miguel Vargas is going to be one of these guys that's going to have to help carry the offense. And, you heard a lot about the hand movement. He changed his batting stance. But ever since doing that, man, he's been a lot better. His numbers this year have been really, really good. I'm going to pull up exactly. Let me see. So, yeah, this is scored at MLB.com, Scott Merkin. Vargas for the first 22 games this season, which was 89 plate appearances. He was slashing 139, 236, 203, with no home runs and 6 RBIs. Over his last 17 games, which is a 70 plate appearance sample size, he's hitting 328, 414, 541 with 3 homers, 9 RBIs, pair of doubles, 9 walks. So, I mean, he's starting to rake. That ball he hit last night was absolutely crushed into left field. So Vargas starting to hit well, and he's playing good defense too. He had a couple plays at third that game last night where he was charging in, and you made a really nice play. So that's been encouraging to see. You can get some more power from Vargas. That's really going to help this offense because they're getting the guys on base. It's just a matter of driving them in. They get a lot of ducks in the pond, and they don't capitalize. Now, another reason they're not capitalizing, I hate to keep harping on Andrew Vaughn, But man, Andrew Vaughn's base running has been terrible the last couple of weeks, man. I mean, in the same week, he got thrown out at home twice. One, you watch him run, and it's like watching mud slide uphill. I needed a calendar to clock him running to home the other day. But like twice, it was just like a terrible read. He just took off at home and was a sitting duck at the plate and kind of threw away a couple of runs. It was two really bad examples of base running last night in particular. The ball hit the first base. They doubled him up, went right to the first baseman. He goes charging home. Of course, he's slow. He's racing. If Andrew Vaughn, in that particular play, I am convinced if he was racing a pregnant woman, he would have finished third in that situation. It was a tough look for my boy Vaughn. I want Vaughn to do well, man. I really, there's a lot of negativity around him. And he's under a lot of pressure right now, especially, you get Elko coming up. Elko hits a nuke on Mother's Day, which was nice to see. Good for Tim. That was long deserved for Elko to get called up. So I was glad he had some early success upon getting called up there. Speaking of the bullpen, though, it was a shame they kind of blew that Shane Smith start that game earlier this week. But what are you going to do? But yeah, I mean, that's just another one. It's like, Vaughn, you can't be doing that. I know I think he's feeling the pressure. There we go. Hopefully we're back now. Yeah, sorry about that. We had laptop was about to die. I had to charge in, put in a charger here. So we're back now. But yeah, I think Vaughn's under a lot of pressure because Elko's coming up and he's starting to press more than he would. And I think it led to some boneheaded base running mistakes. So that's something I would hope they would have to address because you can't be having that, especially when you're struggling to score as it is. You can't be throwing away outs. Some other big news. We were talking about Robert earlier. There is a little Bob Nightingale from USA Today reported that the Mets have they're starting to get a little bit. They're starting to get interested in acquiring Mr. Luis Robert Jr. Their outfit situation in a bit of flux right now. They've had a couple injuries to this point, so they could use another guy. So Nightingale says, it isn't very serious talks. They've inquired about him. He says that the White Sox are interested in the Mets' number 15th ranked prospect, Blake Tidwell, who made his MLB debut against the Cardinals last season on May 3rd. He gave up 6 runs and 3.2 innings of work. He's 23 years old, currently has a 4.45 ERA and 7 starts for AAA Syracuse this season. My initial reaction to that is I think Robert, again, that value is going to keep going up. I don't think he's even been playing bad this season. I think he's played some really good defense. You've seen some power with the 5 homers. He's got to get the average up and the slugging percentage up a little bit. We need a few more extra base hits, but if he continues to walk the way he does, continues to steal bases at the rate he does, and is playing the defense we all know Luis Robert Jr. can play, I think that value is going to rise. I think he get a little bit better than it looks like an average MLB starter right now. If he is the headliner of that package, there better be some other names included in that. Now, I get Robert's had, injury history, coming off a really bad season last year. So if you're another team, you're probably not giving up premium prospects for him. But if you're going to get a middle-of-the-road guy, especially in a team like the Mets, I think you can do a little bit better than the 15th ranked prospect in that system. That's just me. I think if the White Sox would be wise, I hope that Chris Getz takes the approach. And that was one thing I liked about him. While you can debate whether it was an effective trade or not, but we saw this with Dylan Cease. He waited a long time to make that deal. He was in no rush. It was on his terms. Hey, my asking price is going to be met. Otherwise, I'm hanging on to this guy. And I think it was very similar with Garrett Crochet. No one met his asking price at the last year's deadline. It's like, all right, fine, we'll hang on over the rest of the season. So I hope he does that with Robert because I think they can get a little bit more out of Robert. Robert at fully healthy, he can be a star player in this league. He just hasn't shown that he can do it consistently. Final thing I want to touch on here, Shoeless Joe Jackson was reinstated to the Major League Baseball. Joe Jackson, one of the most prolific hitters in White Sox history. His .340 batting average over his 6 seasons in Chicago, still the franchise record. Helped them win a World Series in 1917. One of the best hitters on that team. He hit .301 that year. In an era that there wasn't a lot of home runs, the man had 30 of them in his career, which is, pretty impressive. Babe Ruth even said he learned a lot from watching Shoeless Joe hit. The guy was really good. Obviously, if you know your White Sox history, he got banned from baseball in 1921 for throwing the 1919 World Series, allegedly, with 8 other players. You know, you have the famous movie 8 Men Out. But Joe Jackson was illiterate. So a lot of historians have argued that he didn't really know what he was getting into. If you look at his numbers that series, he played really, really well. He set an ML World Series record at the time with 12 hits in that series. Didn't make an error in the outfield. Just had an overall really, really good series. So, you know, and he'd been adamant even after the fact. The press was asking about him in 1942, and he was adamant, hey, I did not cheat. I did not throw that World Series. So a lot of people. So it is interesting that he finally gets reinstated all these years later, 106 years later. And, you know, because after he got banned, you know, he was done, and he never returned. And all 8 players ended up, you know, that were a part of that scandal, also been reinstated. Now, no guarantee they're going to get into the Hall of Fame, but it is an interesting conversation because his resume is certainly worthy of being in the Hall. But now he's in the conversation with guys like, you know, associated with this big gambling scandal with the other 8 guys that were reinstated. And with a guy like Pete Rose, who was also reinstated, who really caught most of the headlines. News from Rob Manfred. I know President Donald Trump was very adamant about saying, like, hey, Pete Rose deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. Shortly, he met with Manfred. Shortly after that, this news all drops. I think it's a very interesting discussion. And I feel kind of two different ways. You know, there's two sides to be had. On the surface, both of these players, Pete Rose and Shoeless Joe Jackson, resume-wise, they deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. Now, a lot of the arguments are, you let them in, it's going to taint the legacy of baseball because they put a bad name on the game. They call it the Black Sox scandal for a reason. You know, these guys are throwing World Series on purpose, accepting money from gamblers. You know, what type of example are we setting, especially in this day and age now, where gambling's more prevalent than ever? What type of example are we setting if we let these guys in the Hall of Fame and we say we forgive them? Pete Rose, you have the same thing. He's also betting. He gets caught betting on baseball. Never really showed any remorse for it. If you watch that HBO documentary on him, it was so frustrating because there were so many times, because you could tell how much it meant to him to get in the Hall of Fame. And there were so many times that he could have, I think, soothed things over if he had just apologized and been genuine about it. But he never really showed any remorse. Every time they asked him to apologize, it was always some half-assed thing. He never really admitted, you know, he was never, no wrongdoing. And then on top of that, you have the statutory rape allegations from a 15-year-old. And when they asked him about it, his response was, this is during a fan day too in Cincinnati. Some reporter asked him about it. His response was, well, I thought she was 16 at the time. Not a good look for people you want to get in the Hall of Fame. So I understand that. Like, you know, it's like, hey, do we want to tarnish baseball's legacy by letting these guys in? But I think the Hall of Fame, at the end of the day, it's a museum. It's a museum about baseball. And you cannot tell the story of baseball without Pete Rose, without Shoeless Joe Jackson, without the Black Sox. If their talent on the field and their play and their resume warrants a Hall of Fame induction compared to their peers, which Pete Rose certainly does, and Shoeless Joe Jackson, if you look at the other players in his era, also certainly does, they should be let in. My opinion, you can't keep a guy out of the Hall of Fame because he was a dick. Now, I believe that Pete Rose deserved to be suspended from baseball for the gambling, and I think he's not a very good human being. But to Manfred's point, he's like, look, their penalties were served. You know, as long as they were alive, they didn't get reinstated. And for Pete Rose, it's almost kind of cruel. It was almost kind of a cruel punishment for Pete Rose. And he even talked about that in that HBO documentary. I definitely recommend watching that. But that was one of the things. He was like, I would hate it. You know, I just don't want it to be where I die and then I don't get to enjoy being inducted in the Hall of Fame. Sure enough, as soon as he dies, now he's been reinstated. So it is kind of a cruel punishment if you really, really think about it. But the punishment was served. So if I was a voter, I would vote for both of them to get in. That doesn't take away from the fact I don't think he is a very good person. Pete Rose I'm talking about. But for both Shoeless Joe and both Pete Rose, you can't tell the story of baseball without those two. And their play on the field certainly warrants joining some of those other guys. You know, you look at the Hall of Fame too. It's not like these are all great human beings. There's a lot of racists in the Hall of Fame. You know, there's a lot of people that had, you know, you're telling me there's no one that done steroids in the Hall of Fame? I find that hard to believe. I feel like there's a few that snuck in. We'll see. I don't think just because they got in, they're all these great humans. But you can't exclude a guy just because he was a dick. But, you know, that's just me. That's all we have for you. Thank you so much for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your week.